we're going to get started right away because John only has a few minutes. So I'd like to call this meeting of the Operations Planning Committee for Thursday, May 23rd to order. We didn't have a meeting last month, so I'm sure we have a number of things to catch up on. So I will turn it to John Cini right away, and Steve is also here from Planning and Zoning.
I think the first item, Carol and I will kind of share because we talked last night.
Sorry.
So one of your requests was to discuss communication amongst boards. And,
Yeah.
Okay. So on May 14th, Dr. Brenner, I'm not sorry. Landon. They merge in my brain sometimes.
It's been a year, John.
Well, around certain issues. Anyway, Dr. Landon made some comments at the Board of Education meeting regarding whether or not we, as a commission, fulfilled our duty to the town, the neighbors, the application. And I sent an email requesting a retraction or a change, and since then he's kind of dug in deeper. And it was, bottom line, it was a factual misrepresentation of what the commission did. And I rewatched the tape last night as Tara and I were discussing, and full disclosure, I had some pointed words to the Board of Ed, but not misleading, based on some frustrations which happened throughout the EPC hearings and some complaints and the fact that they weren't addressed over a 5-week period. But I don't think that's the main issue. I think it's the main issue that we have a superintendent of schools that's questioning a body that is actually reviewing the Board of Education's application to the Planning and Zoning Commission during the process of deliberations. Literally, we were deliberating on the evening that these comments were made. And I have the quote, if anybody wants it. I don't think we need to rehash it. And I'm only seeking a remedy that somebody either from the Board of Education or Dr. Landon make a correction in that he was misinformed in making those claims. I think it's important for the record. Everything we do on the Planning and Zoning Commission can be appealed. As I discussed with Tara yesterday, the most innocuous statements can find their way into a lawsuit. And I think it's important for the public record that it's remedied. Yeah, full disclosure, Tara and I, you can just, again, you can please weigh in, but we're in discussions about who participated at the hearing, what the scope of the hearing was. I have the draft resolution. Yeah. Can I just finish? And the draft resolution during there, and so that's basically the angst of my complaint and my desire to remedy the situation as we close the. We're expected to deliberate draft resolution on both items, both Diller and Darien High School, and I would just hope that we can find a remedy before we close this matter.
So can I, before anybody else chimes in, I want to be very sensitive to what's shared around this table isn't inadvertently impactful to your discussions because the application is still open. So
yeah.
You'll take it from here.
Yeah, and I fully recognize that, and the draft is only a draft, and it's a working document, and I'm making no claim that it's going to be passed. It's just if we complete it, I'd like it remedied by the end of that.
So John and I have discussed this at length. The superintendent was encouraged and did reach out to Mr. Cini to please sit down. So, I would prefer to handle this situation that way. If we want to have a conversation, the board, which is the governmental ruling body, has never kind of made a comment of anything out of order for P&Z. But if we want to have that conversation, I think it's a broader conversation. And I think it's a conversation over general discourse between boards and what's appropriate and what's not. And we can do that, but I think that's
number 2.
well, I think that's really the issue. So I would still prefer the governing body what the Board of Education has no issue with P&Z. They are the ones.
There were a couple of comments that came very close. One by Mrs. Stein during that same hearing too. Okay.
So again, I think this is
very
best
close.
In the specifics, or we can get into the general conversation, because I think what we would have to start to look at is how we have all behaved. And kind of.
This is a misrepresentation of the facts, not a behavior issue. One might not like my directness.
So then we can do it. So
Okay.
then let's do that. I think that if you I think Dr. Landon needs to own his words. I would encourage you to sit down with him. I'm happy on behalf of the Board of Education to make clear that I think P&Z has done their job, is in the process of doing their job, and that we have no concerns of the job they have done.
Thank you.
But in that case, then I think we need to start to look back at comments made that talk about the work of the Board of Education, who should take what role, who should, and as you acknowledged to me, some of your comments the other evening acknowledge, I hope that the board does this. I hope they consider it in one of their responsibilities of their elected duty and not administrative. Those are all issues which P&Z has no decision on, and yet there are comments and opinions being offered in a public meeting.
Because the neighbor was addressing them to us. So my exact quote was, "I also have my frustrations sometimes, as they well know, and hopefully they don't view it as an administrative matter and take it under their hands as elected officials." That was the quote.
Yes. So I guess the issue I would ask you is, if you and Dr. Landon, as I have encouraged, have a particular issue on his words, I would encourage you to sit down.
I've requested that since last Friday. I still don't have an offer from Dr. Landon
Yes, you
as of
do.
today.
I don't think it's scheduled. I think he asked Mrs. Vazel yesterday or the day before to reach out and schedule something
She
with
has
you,
not
Jeremy.
yet. Okay,
So we can
we're
follow up
closing
on
on
that.
a week and closing
But from
on
a
my last
governmental
meeting.
standpoint, I don't think there's any issue with P&Z's work.
Thank you.
Further, and if that's the second issue, I think it dovetails nicely into it. I think we have to look back. And John, I'm going to use P&Z because we're here, but it is what it is. You know, we have a series of emails over a sports facility issue where you weighed in and you not only impugned the board work, what the board did, district personnel as knee-jerk, you went to other board members and said, you know, your board chair is dismissive. These are all things that if we want to talk about how we engage in work and how we look at work and what's the right processes, I think we have to have an open dialogue if that there needs to be change.
I've asked for that open dialogue from both you
Well, as
and your
early
vice
as
chair.
as early as April, you were actively engaged in it. When you did not like the decision, you were going around to other members, asking them to engage.
Right.
And so that is actually not within P&Z's authority. And yet here's a matter where you're deciding whether the board did their job, disparaging district personnel for the decisions they made, and weighing in. I signed John C's P&Z chair. So I think what we can all do is we all so often make mistakes. The best thing is for adults to sit down in a room, have the conversation. Sometimes we take it on the chin. Sometimes, if there's a real issue like you feel there is here, I would encourage you to sit down with Dr. Landon. If it has not happened, I will facilitate that. And I also make sure that from a governmental standpoint, the Board of Education is very clear that P&Z has done their job. I'm not really sure, unless you want to engage in examining your own contributions to this, whether there's anything around this table that's fruitful. And that's really my own look. And that's only as early as April. I mean, we can start going back further and further. I just don't know how productive it is.
And again, it's your board has had problems dealing with planning and zoning issues, so I want to make sure that we don't go down that same path.
So I actually perceive that we have two separate issues here. The issue that you both have just articulated, specific to planning and zoning, which I will underscore because I've been reminded plenty times when I have to go before P&Z or an issue is about to go before, how sensitive all of the communication is while an application is pending. Tough to manage sometimes. I think the other issue that we have is general inter-board communication. And that's really something that I'd like to take the last few minutes while you're still here, John, to talk about. So I can only talk about from my perspective as first selectman and chairman of my board in my time, that I have a very open policy, or it's not even really a policy. Myself and my board, we have a very open and transparent way of people accessing me, accessing my board members, accessing staff, asking questions. Things don't go through me. If someone needs information from Jen Charneski or Kate Bush or Ed Gentle, any other staff member, they, at least until now, have been free to go to staff members and ask what they need to ask. So maybe I guess I'd like to understand how that works for other boards, number one. I think I have a sense, but I don't want to assume that I understand that. And then for us to come to some kind of a resolution on where we want to see those lines of communication so that everybody's following kind of the same procedures and no one is overstepping boundaries, if you will. You know, we want to be respectful of policies that are in place. We certainly, as I mentioned in my brief communication yesterday, we want to have the right processes in place that serve our needs, but also serve the needs of the people that we serve. So I'd like to have a little bit of a discussion about that. We may not come to a resolution today, but I'm hearing things that we have some challenging communications going on. And, you know, I'd like to work together with all of you to resolve that.
Our board, anybody can call Jeremy and make an inquiry. Anybody can, from our board and from the public, can call any commissioner. We don't have any restrictions on that. The only thing I do is set agendas and try to lead discussions and coordinate amongst other boards, but that sometimes is left to others.
Even if you have a pending application?
Pending application, we got to be
prefer.
really careful about what.
Okay.
Once it's in the fray, then none of us can talk about that. I was talking about the planning phases
General
and that
flow
sort
of
of thing.
information. Okay. All right.
Yeah, for the Board of Finance, anybody can ask for data. In fact, it's frequent that members of the Board of Finance will call Jen Charneski or Kate Bush or others and simply ask questions. And these can be anything from data requests, help or clarification, information, or just education. Inevitably, the professional staff are the ones that are familiar with the rules, regulations, attend conferences, and do this as for their living. And so they're always going to have a sharper perspective on a lot of things than we do as volunteers. And so we rely on an open dialogue with all those individuals to talk about all these things and keep us informed in our elected roles. I've got no problem with any board member of mine requesting any of that sort of thing. Where I like to get involved is if any of that information or data that's requested generates an analysis or a perspective or a point of view that suggests a change or something new. I like to know about it just so that I can be informed about it and also decide whether we need to take it to the full board and have a discussion about it. But that's how I've handled it historically. I'll comment briefly on data requests that we've been dealing with recently from Jim Palin, who's a member of our board. This pertains to budget transfers. And what these are, you take an original budget over the course of a budget year, there'll be transfers in and out of budgets, and you get to a revised budget. Fairly innocuous, but it can be interesting to take a look at that to understand why those transfers are made, with the end being, does that inform something different about how we should think about budgeting? And so Jim put this request to the Board of Education. I think there was maybe some miscommunication or unclear intent as to what the purpose of that request was, which led to some delays and a lot of communication back and forth about whether that data should be presented or given to Jim. I would like to echo what Jamie said. I mean, we're all elected officials. We're having a discussion and just had a heated discussion on live television for the entire town to see. I think as a firm and fast rule, we should err on the side of transparency at all times. There should be nothing, no data, unless it's protected data by law or it's executive session because it's personnel or sensitive negotiations. There's not anything that we should be doing that's not fully transparent to the public at all times and in all circumstances. And so I'd like to go back to that basic principle for everything that certainly my board does, and I'd encourage it for every other town board. As it pertains to this specific request, the reality is that the data that we're talking about is publicly available data and data that's available to any citizen in this town on request, and we're required by law to give it. If we don't give it, we're subject to a FOIA request. And so for this data that Jim's requested, I'd actually like now to pass that back over to you, Tara. I'd like to actually get that information sent to me and to Jim so that we can take a look at it. I don't think we've discussed in the past whether that is something that should go to a full Board of Finance vote. I've thought about that. The reality is that we're simply asking for data that's available to anybody in the public, and that therefore I don't think requires or rises to the level of needing or a full board vote for really any board for a data request like that. So I think by doing it this way, it reconfirms our intent that says we need to make sure that we're fully transparent about everything that we're doing, and that anytime there's a request for data or something like that, I think among all of our boards, we should treat it in that manner, and it should just simply be granted. In terms of any analysis that we might do with that, I'd also get back to that principle, which is if we do an analysis on this, I want everybody to see it. Let's have an open dialogue about it, and then debate in an open and democratic way. What does that analysis tell us about what we're doing, and maybe how we should work going forward, with the intent being that it improves the way we manage and run all aspects of the town. So anyway, that's my perspective from the Board of Finance.
Yep.
So let me share generally how the Board of Education works, and then I'll speak to some of the specifics mentioned. The Board of Education, and that's with guidance from the Connecticut Association of Board of Educations, no individual board member can order work from administration. Work is ordered as a whole voting body. So you'll often see in our meetings, someone will say, I'd like to see X, and I will ask the group, is this work ordered by the Board of Education? And most of the time you'll see a unanimous vote, because to John's point, oftentimes if it's analysis or information, there's no point in not doing it. Sometimes you'll see someone who wants something very specific, and or they already have it and they didn't know that they had it, and so what we don't do is task our administration with redoing work that they already have. And so you'll see those discussions, and if you watch enough of our meetings, you'll see is that the question often asked, is this work being ordered by the Board of Education? And that's in guidance under attorneys, CABE. I'd have to look specifically if it's state statute, but I also believe it's in our policy that work is ordered by the Board of the Administration, no individual member. Because quite frankly, we don't keep individual members running administration around. We keep them focused on the kids.
Quick question. What do you mean by work? Like somebody asks you for something, like a task?
Well, no, if someone
It's not
asks
like
for
cut the grass.
an analysis
Okay,
or something.
okay.
And so it's kind of a general, you'll see it often in our meetings. As to the specific particular request, because quite frankly it has generated lots of emails, and some which quite frankly are concerning, but John has been great. I have reached out to him. We received a request for work, and so the question was from a member, not the chairman of a board, and so the question was put, is this work ordered by the Board of Finance? At the time, John and I ended that conversation. He told me to please hold, and I said at which point the chairman requested us to, we would be happy to provide the information. Also noting that in the interest of transparency, all the information has already been provided. It wasn't simply provided in kind of the way in which it was requested.
And just to be clear, this is sort of PDF, hard to work with, versus an Excel spreadsheet, easy to work with. That's kind of what we're talking
well,
about.
no, we're talking a little different. Let's be clear. We are talking that there was an information for all Board of Education requests for the year. All Board of Education or transfers for the year. The transfers are provided quarterly. There was a request for them all in one run on an Excel spreadsheet. I will have to look. I actually believe there are administrative regulations prohibiting the release of financial information in any other form other than PDF, but I am happy to check on that. So the question came because it was such an unusual request, and the information was already had by Board of Finance members. You know, what are we doing here? But I think through 3 conversations, John and you and I have had, you have said hold until I tell you this is what I think, and so I have held. At this point, now that you are willing to run it, it will go to the Board of Education. They will order the work, and the administration will provide it.
Great.
So there's been no secrecy here. There is nothing but transparency.
Can I interrupt you? So I agree with that. I want to emphasize what you're saying. This has not been a discussion about secrecy and no transparency and all this. This is really about procedures and protocols and trying to get this done. So I just want to say I appreciate the calls that we've had to kind of sort all this out, have been just an oddly difficult situation. But I think actually getting this data smooths all this over in a way that works quite well.
Yeah, and to be clear, and I think to Jamie's broader message, I think that what made it difficult is John and I have had a very open dialogue. I mean, he's called me from overseas, which quite frankly, I imagine when you're overseas in London, this is not really what you want to be dealing with. The methods employed by a member of the Board of Finance, to me, merit some conversations. If both your board chairs give you an answer that we're in a holding pattern, I'm not sure why you're soliciting other board members and quite frankly asking them to please disagree with their chair. So that's the civility part of this, where I think we generally do very well, I think, around this table. the more that we can impress upon our members that there's a procedure and protocol and have it be clear and have everyone follow it, I think the better served we are as a town.
Well, let me just say one thing about, so Jim Palin, the person who's requested this, I have his back 100%. Jim Palin has been a stalwart volunteer in this town with the best motives and the best volunteer intent and spirit of literally anybody I know. And so for him to request all this was done with the intent of helping and serving this town. This was not something where he has misbehaved or mishandled all this. I just want to make sure that I'm clear and on record that I back him
Well,
up 100%.
so let's be clear, his intent and his
But-
volunteerism is not a question, but I would say if we are clear on our procedures, then maybe
This-
everyone can follow
It's
them.
totally fine, but I want to make sure that I'm clear that this is not about Jim. Jim has done the right thing on all this. What we're trying to sort through on this are the procedures and protocols for getting data like this requested in the right way for all of our boards without adding bureaucracy and maintaining, to my earlier point, a spirit of transparency and openness. So again, I think setting all aside what we've been going through lately, focusing on let's get this particular request covered and then go back to these principles where, look, there's a free and open dialogue among these boards for requested data like this, I think it'll be better.
So I'm not going to disparage anyone's spirit of volunteerism or work, but I do think that it is incumbent upon us as chairs to remind people of policies and procedures, and if that can help,
Totally
and it
agree.
can
Yep.
stop sort of the, what I would say, unnecessary work from all of us,
Right.
it would be.
Or just
it would be-
misunderstandings, I agree.
Well, what I'd like to say is it's clear to me that we have different policies and procedures. Some of our boards don't have policies and procedures and really act in a very open manner. Anybody can talk to anybody, as I said before. You know, quite frankly, and I'll only speak from my perspective, I'm the chairman of my board. The charter says that I do the will of my board. I don't gatekeep information, and if someone out in the public or on another board feels passionate about an issue, about ordering certain information, they have every right to go to my Board of Selectmen members and quote-unquote lobby, if you will, so that, you know, Susan could come to me and Kip could say, hey, you know, this request has been made, let's talk about that. We don't have a procedure in place where our board votes on work requests of staff, and I understand and respect that it sounds like the Board of Education does. So we will follow that procedure for the Board of Education. But it brings up the larger issue for me about the differences in policies among our boards, which is something that we're going to have to now go back and talk about. John's going to go back and talk about it with his board. I'm going to talk about it with my board, because having inconsistent policies across boards, I think, is somewhat problematic.
So I just think, I do think words have power, and we have to be careful. There's no one on the Board of Education gatekeeping. There's no gatekeeping. There is a procedure in place, and so the board follows their procedure. Whomever is sitting in the chair is charged with following procedure. I would agree with you. I act on the will of my board. My board has a procedure in place, therefore I act on that procedure.
But your board gatekeeps. That's really what I'm saying. I'm not using it in a negative way. You have a policy in place that requires that all information work orders go through your board and require a vote. That's, you know, that you're vetting those work requests so that your staff is not unduly overburdened or being asked for inappropriate requests. And as I said, I'll repeat, I respect that. That's completely up to you. Obviously, it sounds like CABE and the attorneys and perhaps state statute back you on that. So we all respect that.
What we do need to be, and I will check, because that's how the board works internally.
Okay.
So that's been our model for how when requests come in.
Yeah.
So, but if the chair of the Board of Finance is the Board of Finance likes this, and the chair does not believe his board needs a vote, I'm happy to bring that forward to my board.
Right.
So there is a
Great.
slight
Yeah.
nuance there.
Yeah.
If you as the first selectman say, the first selectman would like to see X, I'm happy to bring that to the board. How you order work within your own boards, clearly and respectfully, is
Right.
your choice.
But I think
That's
the
true.
difference that Jamie
It
was
is-
just
it is our
saying.
choice, but
Yeah.
now we're going to have to talk about it.
Okay.
Right, and the difference, I think, is that your board has the ability, because they can vote on it, whether it's an upvote or a downvote. So if there's a request by any of the boards, it's totally, what you're saying is it's totally under your jurisdiction to decide whether to follow through with the request or not. It's just similar to the RTM.
You could say no. Your board could
Where
say
We
the-
could say no, but it's also
Right,
individual
right.
members of the public could request it from a Freedom of Information Act. The point John makes is valid, that all of this is public information. The question is, are we tasking administration to do this? Where, when, and for what purpose?
Well, the difference too, Tara, is are we tasking volunteers? I mean, it sounds like, we also have to be, I think, respectful of our volunteers that are trying to answer to the taxpayers is the bottom line. So if
Elected
the
officials.
information, or elected officials, if the information is readily accessible by, a computer program versus someone manually doing things, it's just a respect back and forth.
I'd also like to be a little bit careful too. Tara, you just said with regard to vetting a request based on its purpose.
Yeah.
I think that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think
That may have been misspeak. I would agree
yeah,
with you.
With public
We're not looking
information,
for
I don't, it
It doesn't
doesn't
matter
matter
what
the
what the purpose is.
I would agree, and I
Yeah.
would take that statement back. I'm just trying to say that what we say to our staff, okay, divert from the work you're doing for school children, because there's a request over here. We like to be able to tell them, the request has come from the Board of Finance. They find it valid, and our board has decided that that's what you need to do right now, and so stop. Put those pencils down and do this. Sometimes that's a 5-minute request.
But I'd point
and that's
out,
easy.
I'd point out that, yes, we have to meet the needs of children, but if there's a FOIA request from the public, that has the force of law, and you have no choice to comply. We have to comply with that.
And
Is there
I
a
would.
time factor? I'm sorry, Jamie.
Yeah.
Is there a time factor? Because I don't know how often your board meets, but if it comes, for argument's sake, say your meeting is on Thursday, and your next meeting is not for 2.5 weeks, and the request comes in on Friday, that's a delay of 15 days.
So again, this
Yeah,
was
that's
part
the
of
part.
our conversations when this request came in to John. I said, is there an urgent need? If there is, please let us know. Because if there's an urgent need for something, we will do everything we can in order to facilitate that. And that's where I think, in some ways, the board is not working against anyone here. What we're trying to do is make sure that when work comes into us, that it is, and it's on behalf of the Board of Finance, that the Board of Finance knows about it, and that the chair, and that's very typical, either to hear from John, or to hear from John, or to hear from Jamie. When individual members on board start saying, I want to see analysis, I think it's a very natural thing to pick up the phone and call the chair and say, hey, I just got this request, can you tell me about it? What would you like me to do with it?
2 more questions. How do you decipher if it's a 5-minute request or a 24-hour request? If someone says to me, can you email me a spreadsheet? I'm like, sure. And I send it. But if it says, hey, can you do this? And I'm like, geez, that's going to take me half a day.
So the board doesn't hold that information. We would ask administration. And in this particular request, our administration has said we
I mean,
can
I'm
run
sure
it in
there's
5 minutes.
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's
5
very
minute
quick.
request.
It's a 5-minute request.
Then can I make another suggestion? I think this really should come from you. If something happens, if somebody on my board wants it and they ask it of, Duke Deneen, right? He's not the chairman. He's not I don't know if he's the vice chairman or not.
Yeah, he is.
I would suggest that the chairman of both sides gets CC'd, so you can say yes or no. So instead of Palin going to, Maria Stein, if that's the name on the board, hey, can I get this?
Katie.
Katie Stein. Then you would say Palin would CC the chairman, and you would get CC'd also, just so if you want to say no.
I don't
Yeah,
really think
that's
this
what Jim did in
yeah.
this case.
Maybe he did.
talked
I don't
about
think this has
CC.
really been a problem in the past. I think
Yeah.
this one got a little,
I'm looking for an
had a
overall.
life of its own. John
Yeah.
and I spoke, and John, I think what we agreed on, as soon as John said go, the
Go.
board would consider it. And John said go today, sitting right here, and the board will get working on it. So,
Yeah, so I agree, I appreciate that, and in some ways what you're saying is common courtesy,
Yeah.
that people CC the board chair. But truth be told, only from my perspective, I'll always agree with any information request that comes to me or through me.
Yeah.
I would never object, even if I object to the purpose of how that information is going to be used, because it's not my role to deny the information.
See, in my course of business, I have clients that ask my junior stuff,
Yeah,
and they don't tell me. It's a junior guy on the client side, a junior guy on that side, and then I'm like, and then the junior guy walks in my room and goes, should I send this to that guy? I go, hell no. Or yes.
You're in a very
So it's
different
different.
business.
Right, because it's not
But this is a public.
transparency.
Virtually everything we do with sensitivity to HIPAA and FERPA and all of those regulations is open to the public. So,
The other thing I'd mention is keeping with this whole spirit of transparency and openness. I think we had to have good procedures and protocols, but at the end of the day, how long have we all known each other and how long have we all been doing this? I mean, just pick up the phone and call people. It's not a big deal. We all live here. We're all on the same team. And so at one level, making sure all these procedures are followed, I think is important, but we shouldn't use that to impede the flow of information
So also.
at all, ever.
yep.
So this is an example, certainly not to put the spotlight on the Board of Ed. I mean, we just went through an
Let's.
RTM meeting, and I want to make sure that the board, that you as the chair don't feel that this is all of us talking about the Board of Ed, because we've just had an experience of, I'll just say, lack of communication for whatever reason with the RTM. It was a meeting that I don't think many of us would want to ever have again as far as procedure. So it's a good conversation with all the boards. It's not one board against the other board by any means. And the only way we're going to accomplish things is by all of us sitting at the table and going through this. So what can we learn from that experience? What can we learn from the RTM experience so that we know what the policies and procedures are? So going forward, we don't experience any of this again.
I'm happy to be a piñata this week if you'd rather beat up on me. So
Yeah,
that's-
yeah,
that's
Well, no,
it's a
I'm
good
not-
conversation. It's not against one board or the other. It's about
Exactly.
big picture policies and procedures.
Yeah.
It is. I would argue, I would support that it is about big picture policy and procedures.
Yeah.
Although I would like to know if it's in fact the case that there is a state rule that says you can't provide data unless it's in a PDF, I might resign from the board and take up a full-time job lobbying whoever came up with that stupid rule.
So I don't
I'd
think
like
there's
to
a
know
state
that.
rule.
Torches
But I
and
think
pitchforks.
that, I believe the administration has a regulation that that's how they release information.
Okay.
So that's not a state rule. That
Could you
might be.
please find out for us if that regulation applies to internal government bodies?
Yeah, when did it
To
come in?
boards and
Yeah.
commissions?
And if we need to, we
And
need
I
to
think
Because I
that's-
can't imagine that
I-
Mike Feeney sends a PDF to Jen Charneski, for example.
So I don't know, and I will follow up. Even the board, what they get released is PDFs. We don't receive Excel sheets. So I'm happy to follow up
Great.
on that. I think part of this has been the board's commitment to discuss OpenGov, because then everything will be up online, so
I
there'll be
was thinking that
significant
very
changes.
thing.
It's
Well,
odd how that popped
That's
into our
great,
heads.
thank you for bringing that up.
Well,
Appreciate it. All in favor? Aye.
I'm not
Then
figuring out. I'm
Jim
a
could
real
have
estate
taken a
guy.
weekend and
Yeah.
done it on his own.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
So,
word.
exactly. So I think we can dress it up, and I think around this table, we very much value policy and procedure, but I do think we have some civility issues. And I would be remiss if we're having an open conversation not to bring it up. And I think it is incumbent upon us as chairs to reiterate to all the strong opinions and all the good intention that civility matters.
Well, that brings up
Okay.
a point. You and I had a conversation. We don't need to go into detail about the whole conversation, but it applies to our board members as well as staff to
Yeah.
be respectful of all of the hardworking people, whether they're paid employees or volunteers in town.
Yeah.
So yes, you had called me and asked not to handle that conversation in public. So
That's-
since we are, I certainly would say that your feelings were reiterated. I think that in the situation you mentioned, that it was someone trying to be a kind human and supporting one group and in no way disparaging the other.
But you can see how it came across to the other.
I certainly
400
respect you feel
people.
that way. I know that was not the intent.
So, we don't need to get into the details of that situation, but I think I know what you're talking about. I also want to be careful. We use the word civility a lot, and it's appropriate in government to talk about civil interactions. But we don't want to confuse civility and disagreement, because we have the right to disagree.
Absolutely.
We have the right to ask pointed questions in a respectful manner. I consider that to be civil. But I don't want to cloud. I don't actually perceive that anything that we've discussed this morning was rooted in a situation that was not civil. I think.
I don't think that's what was my point at all. I think how we handle ourselves, civility matters, and the only thing I would ask is that we reiterate that to our boards, and that's a non-specific comment. The more we can model that, the more we can encourage that among our boards, I think the better we are.
My perception is that every one of you and every one of your board members always conducts themselves in a civil manner. And I think we should all be very proud of that, even though we may disagree on issues.
I also have a thought for all of you guys. So the Board of Selectmen starts every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Totally, Jamie had decided this, and I think it's a great thing. Maybe you would all consider to do the same. It's certainly not necessary. Certainly the Board of Selectmen can't request anyone to do it, but maybe just think about it, because it's a good way just to start everybody off.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. Didn't somebody challenge that in some other state or county in New
In
York?
Connecticut,
In Connecticut.
upstate Connecticut, yeah.
Anyway,
I
just a
love that idea.
suggestion.
It
Certainly,
kind of reminds you why you're here and what
It
you're doing.
reminds you of your
Under
purpose.
God.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
under God.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks,
Anyway.
Susan, that was very nice. So I think we're ready to move on from that topic.
I have to leave in a little bit myself.
Okay, great. So John, why don't you go?
Yeah, so we missed the April meeting, so as everyone knows, we did pass the budget. It went to the RTM, I think, except for Highland Farms, which they will take up in June. We're essentially done. The overall spending increase came in at less than 2%, I think 1.94 if I've got the numbers right, even though the mill rate increase was a bit higher, and that was driven by the fact that our grand list came down a bit as part of the reval process, though not nearly as much as New Canaan and some other towns that have been under more residential housing price pressure. I just wanted to reiterate, and I know it's coming up at the RTM, that I personally am supportive of the Highland Farms request. I think that is consistent with why that property was acquired. It's consistent with the strategy that the selectmen have laid out in terms of how that's going to be developed, which in turn is consistent with the documents that allowed us to purchase the property, which preclude and prescribe substantial development. I think this is going to be, was an important purchase for the town that we had to bond for, and I think it's important that we maximize the use of that property under the terms of the purchase agreement. And everything that I've seen in terms of what's proposed is consistent with that, and I would encourage the RTM to pass that so that that work can get started.
The zoning commission already opined on that too in their resolution.
Okay, great.
They set the use boundaries on it.
Right, so I definitely think that should move
You
ahead.
do those uses, you gotta spend the money to get those things.
Well,
Under a certain time frame.
Right.
Yeah, oh, that's true.
Yeah, but they can't move forward until the money's appropriated. So the only other thing that we've done recently that's interested, and I'd like to give kudos to Jack Davis for this, they led an effort to find funds that were on the balance sheet of the town, and to the extent those funds were not being used, to close them out and get them into fund balance. We reviewed those, and it ended up being about $415,000 that were in these funds that we simply cleaned out. One of them was from Superstorm Sandy, and there were a few others. And so kudos to RTM and Jack, F&B and Jack, for taking that on. That was a great initiative on his part, and just good stewardship of that money. So that those funds have been swept out and put into fund balance, and we've got a lot better procedures going forward for just managing when those funds are created so that we keep them focused on their purpose and get them cleaned up in an expeditious way.
It's an example of cooperation. From the RTM standpoint, we get tremendous cooperation from all the boards,
Right.
particularly during the budget season. The great part about it is that there's been a long period of time when we've been doing this, and there have been protocols worked out, but it goes, extremely well. There are exceptions from time to time, which
We can learn from them.
have my attention. I'll just say that. I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
The
so-
cooperation, this is great dialogue goes on with the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed in these processes, and it makes passing the.
Not to cut you off, I got to run. Let me
I know,
finish.
excuse me.
Let
All right,
me
I
finish,
just wanted
please.
to bring, since it was there.
Okay.
Excuse me, go.
So on the Oxbridge Building Committee, we've selected both the architect as well as the construction manager. For the architect, it's an outfit called GLAM, G-L-A-M.
Slam.
I'm sorry, SLAM.
Glam and slam.
SLAM. They're exceptional, and I think they're going to come up with some design options for us that are very exciting. For the construction manager, it's O&G and AP Construction. AP are the ones that did the Public Works Garage. These guys are phenomenal. And I think we've got two outstanding selections for that important work, and I feel really good about all that. The big thing coming up is going to be an appropriation vote at the RTM, and it's going to be for the entire school project, all of it. And we have to do that in order to qualify for state grants. And so it's going to be a big pill to swallow, because we need to vote on the entire amount without actually having a lot of details in terms of what we're going to do in order to qualify for these grants. But certainly the building committee and through the Board of Finance, we're going to be very transparent as this process moves along, in the same way we've done with other construction projects, despite the fact that the appropriation is kind of cart before the horse. Last thing, for our summer project this year, I did want to pick up from the budget discussions. We're going to be working with Joan Hendrickson in the Treasury Department to help her update her investment policies and budgeting procedures, something we committed to help her with. And I've already spoken with her about it, and that'll be one of our summer projects. But
I
that's
missed
it.
one point. I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry. When you said before you go for the state grant, you have to tell the state like it's a $50 million school? Is that what you
Yeah.
meant? Okay.
Yeah, you have to both tell them that, and there are certain expenditures that they'll permit in terms of what the grants are based on, and they have to see that the entire amount's appropriated.
Yeah, we
Otherwise, they
can't
won't
move
do that.
forward without an entire appropriation.
Right,
Full
so that's-
proof of full municipal funding.
But so you don't get that $50 million number pulling in the sky could change to 55 or 45. You don't.
It's probably going to be north of 50. We need to make
Whatever,
sure the
yeah,
full
whatever.
amount is,
Yeah.
but
So I believe you're going for 63 in
Yeah.
the June meeting?
yeah, I don't know.
And
Sure.
I met with the architects yesterday. We looked at designs with some of the members of the building committee who have been doing a great job. And so they have numbers, they have reasoning for their numbers, but I think generally in Darien, we like to do things differently, but the state is requiring us to do this, and if we miss June 30th, we have to wait an entire another year to even apply. So
then we
we're
don't want to
delayed.
do that.
Then I have a question for you when we get to it that relates to the to P&Z.
Thank you,
Okay,
John.
thank you, friends.
Yep.
Take care.
Just to follow on that a little bit, I think the intention is to, without egregiously overinflating the number, to come in with a number that's comfortable enough that we hopefully won't have to go back to the RTM for more money, and hopefully the project will come in less than what is being asked, but to give us enough room.
This
This
is,
darn thing, the way this rule is
Yeah.
written, it incites, you're encouraged to go high.
But that's the way
Because you're
it's-
afraid that somehow you won't cover something comes up, and so it's so different from doing the garage.
Yep. So because this meeting is on TV, I want to assure the taxpayers that just because the RTM might approve a $63 million potential expenditure on the Oxridge Elementary School, that is not necessarily the amount that gets bonded and wrapped into debt service paid by the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of a ceiling approval.
Budget cap, I guess, or something.
Well, we want to be careful about not saying a cap, because we don't know how much the school is going to cost, less any reimbursements from the state. And from what I understand, Tara, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the town of Darien is eligible to receive 10.71% of eligible building costs determined by the state of Connecticut. They have their own formulas on appropriate square footage and what amenities can be covered and what can't, all wrapped into a formula that relates to wealth metrics for our town. And then I think there might be a bit of additional money for the spaces that are attributed to ELP. Could be up to 5%, but as of yesterday, Kip Coons didn't really know exactly how that was going to work. So it's enough money that we don't want to leave it on the table. So it's worthwhile getting the appropriation and pursuing the state grant.
I think it would be wise to look at it as two things. There's the state process, and then there's the Darien process. Arguably, and I think a strong argument is the Darien building process is a much tighter process. And if we were doing this all in-house, we would. But to Jamie's point, the state has a lot of money on the table, and so we have to kind of follow those bureaucratic processes in order to get that money. So the best thing for the RTM, and I'm not making the presentation, so this is just looking at all these presentations and working with the building committee, which has been fantastic.
Yeah, they're great.
That the best way to look at it is, we have certain state requirements, and this is that, but have faith in our Darien town processes that have proven to bring projects in that are built well. and that are respectful of the budget, especially in recent years. And if we look at it that way and have faith in Darien, I think the
Thank you.
RTM can
I
feel
appreciate
comfortable.
that.
I was going to just follow on up by one thing. Seth, if there's any way that you can, I don't know if you can put a whole email out to the RTM, but if there's any way that you can encourage all RTM members to be fully engaged from now until the 10th. If they have questions about this, we're discussing it at our meeting on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Building committee discusses it, so there's a wealth of information out there, so everyone can feel very comfortable about the leap of faith that we're hoping that they all take, so
Yep.
that no one feels that this is, I mean, the
Some-
circumstances
oh, yeah.
are, you know.
Absolutely.
So whatever we can do to
Sure.
communicate today, from today until the 10th, I think would be in everyone's best
All the
interest.
building committee meetings
The
are
building
online.
committee
Yeah.
is there, and they'll also present at the RTM.
Yes, and they're presenting, I think, at your
Uh,
meeting on the
Right.
On the
And the
3rd.
RTM is the
Everyone's
night before,
welcome.
so, yeah.
We strongly encourage anyone from
Yeah.
the RTM, everyone from the RTM, not just the assigned committees,
Right.
to join us on June 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And along that breath, where it relates to my board is the MZU zones, the same thing.
Yeah.
That vote is on the 28th, which is next week. That directly affects actually the school, so.
So it
we
may
also-
or
we
may
also
not,
have to-
depending on the design, I think that.
Correct, but it's.
Yeah.
But if, just so I'm clear too, you're voting on the taking on the MU zone policy townwide for
Correct.
a series of town facilities.
Correct, 13, I think.
Even if that doesn't pass, my understanding is that the building committee, if they need to use that, can come back to planning and zoning would be through a
variance.
special permit process
Correct.
to utilize the MU
Correct.
zone. So,
But that's just another, it's another,
Step.
it's another step.
Yes.
It's another time period.
Agreed.
It's, something that they have to do. which
So
is-
not getting ahead of the building committee, I do think there are some designs, and they may or may not be appropriate, that don't require variances or MU, and then there are others that would. And so once they firm that up, and that's within their control, as long as it's within our ed specs, they would come forward to you with whatever the best plan is.
Can I just make one comment? I'm trying to stay in my lane. We have, when there is a public document out there that is when the school was first done, and I think it's option A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3. And it was, I watched the thing on TV when Dr. Brennan was there. That document shows the school basically in the middle of the field, and another school and another school. So if you looked at that document, and it's in my briefcase, which is not here, just from 30,000 feet, you don't need the MU zone.
Yeah,
But
so that
in our-
document.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
In our last meeting, we got up there and said, hey, I'm like, what, why are we arguing about this? Because there's already a set of plans out there for it that were approved by the Board of Education.
Yeah, so the board can't
I
approve
get that.
plans?
I get that. But it's gonna switch. Whoever came up who did it as a private citizen and not as a member of the building committee goes, there are no plans, there are none of this, there are none of that. I'm looking at the guy going, what? So the next day, I pulled him. I'm like, why are people hiding from that? Which is, I didn't understand. But people said, oh, there's nothing. And I'm like, that's blatantly false.
So those were conceptual ideas to see if it was even viable, and
Understood.
the building committee's picked a different architect.
Which is fine.
So
It's
I
just-
do think,
But the plans are out there.
well,
Yeah,
let
yeah.
me interject here. It's actually a question that I have that it created some confusion, right?
Not on my behalf.
Well,
yeah, no, not mine either.
Who's confused?
I think it's reasonable when the Board of Ed wants to build a new school. I don't know, do you really have to go through the process of coming up with those 3 iterations? Can't you say that we have voted as a board that we need to replace the whatever school it is? Let's get a building committee in place, because while that might have been useful for your process, it bears no resemblance to the work that's now being done by even the architects that were in the running to be chosen. All were tasked with certain problems to solve in terms of siting. So those plans are obsolete. And the only
So-
thing we should be focusing on are the plans that will be brought
Yeah,
forward
so
by
I
SLAM.
think as we brought them forward, always what the board, I do think it was necessary for the board to see that, because what we had to decide is, is this the campus we need to do this? What would it mean to consolidate ELP? Do we have enough room? Because we have to make that decision and draw ed specs based on available campus space before coming to you. That being said, they are now obsolete because those were part of a Board of Education decision. It showed concepts that could occur, and there's a different architect that's been hired.
Yep.
So the building committee's plans now supersede those.
Yep.
However, they were necessary in order to even see if, what we were talking about was a possibility. They also came as part of an entire building study for all campuses of where do you have room to build on what campuses. It doesn't mean that we will choose to build on those campuses, but we do need to know as we plan for enrollment, as we look at what programs we may or may not. So they have a different purpose, and oftentimes people might think them something that they're not. But we can be very clear that anything coming out of the building committee supersedes decision-making that you saw in the Board of Ed.
Which is fine.
They were
Yeah.
conceptual, like the Parks Master Plan.
I get it 100%, but you can't hide behind them. They're out there. But I bet you with dollars to donuts that the plans that come out of the architect at the end of the day have similar sighting to those conceptual plans.
No.
It's
So we'll
it's
see.
I bet you it's the
certainly,
same exact spot.
It's certainly
just
possible.
correct, but it's even, remember a couple of years ago when you did the Parks and Rec study?
Yeah.
And you said, hey, can a pool fit on that piece of
Yeah.
grass?
Yep.
Can it fit? The answer is yes.
Correct.
Whether it's going to be twisted this way,
Yeah.
that way, or whatever happens at all.
There's-
I just don't
there's-
want to hide from anything.
There's plenty of variables, and, it's a limited site. And the variables are, do you build a school while one school is still in session? Do you phase the construction so that kids can overlap in the buildings?
Yeah, we're just
right?
getting into the weeds. That's
So,
fine.
Okay. Where are we now?
I can go after
Go
if
ahead,
we
Tara.
can key
Yeah.
off the building committee. Again, thank you. I think they're doing a great job. We were happy to sit with the architects yesterday and look at plans and see if they met ed specs. Some did, some we felt didn't. So it was a good conversation, and we appreciate the work and the speed at which they are working. Because I would support the idea that as long as it is a good plan, hitting this June 30th deadline is incredibly important.
So if some ed specs need to be modified,
Yes.
what is your process for that? And does that have to happen in short order to meet the June 30th?
So we did speak about that with the committee. Part of it was particular plans. And so there are different concepts, and it was easy to say some concepts worked or didn't work because they didn't meet end specs. Then, yes, the architects are now tasked with, if they have any changes, to bring them back to us, and they need to be voted on by the Board of Education, and so they would be done post haste. So if we needed to convene a special meeting in order to do it, we are committed to doing that. And Kip and I discussed timelines, so I think we're good on that.
Can I interrupt 1 second? I'm sorry. It's just, but it affects us next week. If any of these conceptual plans that you guys already seen need any zoning changes, wouldn't you want to have those zoning changes somehow blessed before June 10th or whatever these?
So
deadlines are?
that's the building committee. The best thing would be to talk to Kip about that, because I don't know what
I don't
plan
talk
they're
to
going to
anybody.
design.
I want them to
Yeah.
talk to me.
Yeah.
Final, I think
No.
you're talking about more final.
No, I don't talk about anything. But if the zoning setback now is 100 feet and some architects want it to be 48 feet, that's a change.
I
That's my
would
only
say that I
question.
think for the application at the moment, what they need proof of municipal funding and they need ed specs. Kip can tell you, because he really has been knowledgeable on this, Kip and Duke, whether they need any concerns from P&Z, and so I will encourage them, and Jamie can as well, to reach out if they need anything by June 30th from P&Z. I don't believe they do,
I'll
or
ask
you
Kip
would
to
have
call
heard
you.
from them. Yeah.
I'll ask Kip to call you.
Okay.
I don't think they need it for June 30th. I think your action at your planning and zoning meeting, the outcome of the MU zone decision, will either give more latitude or not.
I don't think it's going to pass.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to pass.
But then there's the special permitting, so
Yeah.
I think we're.
It's not a special permit. It's a change in zone.
No, but Steve, if they do need to come back to you,
Correct.
they'll have time to do, I mean.
And if
there's-
they spent a month and a half or up to the 30th getting plans at 48 feet
But
away.
this is not planned, this is not going to
Okay,
be
all
the
right, that's-
specific plan.
I think you're good,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Kip will reach
I'm
out.
just,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
There won't-
appreciate
There
it.
won't be any plans on paper for the June 30th application to the
Correct.
state.
Why is the architect working so hard by June 30th?
No. There are requirements that need to be as part of the state statute, and part of that is proof of conception, proof of municipal use. There's also ed spec changes. There may be, there may not be. That's what we were talking. So if we said, for example, a room has to be 25 square feet, and the architect says, I think I can do it at 24.5, that simple of a change requires a vote of the Board of Education. So we're just trying to sync up our lists so that there's no bureaucratic holdup. I do
We
really
just want to be helpful. that's
yeah,
all.
no, and I think that these guys have it really well together, but I'll encourage them to reach out to P&Z if there's any questions. I'm sure Jamie will as well.
Yeah, they can call Jeremy.
So, as John said, our budget passed. We had really productive conversations with the RTM, so thank you to both Clara Satori and Jack Davis. We reached out to them afterwards because I think the discussions were helpful to all three groups, and we appreciated all the work they put in. We worked with the Board of Finance, and John and I spoke often, which was great, and so it was nice to have a very clear and transparent, as everyone finds important, budget process, and we are really looking forward to serving the kids and
The
appreciate.
dialogue there is very good.
Yes.
And that's what makes it flow,
Yeah, and so we appreciate, the support of the community for the kids again, because we know that it's a sizable part of the budget overall. We really have been back in our educational work, which is great. You may hear that the state has changed some graduation requirements for high school. We have voted on those, and we have adjusted as needed, so the incoming 8th graders will be well-served and prepared. As usual, Darien was kind of on the forefront of that, which made the changes minimal. You can get awards in all sorts of things, but we were happy to receive the U.S. News World Reports for the best high school in Connecticut. Doesn't mean that they're not areas we're always trying to improve, but we'll take the pluses and acknowledge the minuses where we need to. Similarly, I think Darien was awarded somewhere the best place to live in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So congratulations to everyone around here for making that happen. And I think we're really focused on finishing out the year strong and then welcoming Dr. Adley into a healthy and productive environment, which I think we have set up for him, and I'm sure Darien will continue to do. If you see seniors around town, they are not skipping school. Our seniors are out on their internship program. I did get a couple calls, why are there so many kids in town already? We're very proud of our internship program, and we are finding more and more students availing themselves of it, and I think it sets them up for both their next steps, whether it be college or work, but also, just in life, getting up, going to work. And so we're very proud of it. And we'll remind you to any seniors who have a government internship or are watching this, your advisors do check in on where you are. So, but we've been really proud, and we're excited to congratulate the class of 2019 very shortly.
Do you have enough jobs for the kids?
Yes.
Because they always ask me if I can take on an intern, and we're not allowed to because we have to pay them.
Yeah, they reach out as much as they can to offer as much diverse. I mean, we've had kids in emergency rooms delivering babies, and we have kids who are taking real estate internships, whether that be commercial or residential. So we really try to offer or support if a student brings forward an idea, as long as it works into the journal and dialoguing and kind of really making sure it's an enriching process for them. So there is a plethora.
Good.
I think someone once got an internship at the Beardsley Zoo, taking care of animals, because that was their passion. Like, it's been really neat to see how well this community and the surrounding communities have embraced our students, and the feedback we get from the sponsors of internships has been that we're really sending them really great interns. So the students should be proud. The students in the past should be proud of the work they've done.
Are there kids that don't participate in internships?
They are, and they can attend regular classes, but I think this year, I don't have the numbers, but last year it was almost all seniors. And the program started small and has just grown because I think everyone has really seen the value. And they are responsible for work, and they check back in with the schools, and like I said, they have an advisor who comes in and checks with them and dialogues with the sponsor and dialogues with the intern and checks the work. So it's a program Darien should be very proud of.
To your knowledge, are there kids that participate in internships that would be in the trades or in advanced manufacturing, trying to think about how to sort of integrate that into the thought process of some students who might be looking to take a non-traditional path to a four-year college.
So I don't know this year we'll see the report, but I do know in the past, yes,
Yeah.
there are kids who participate in trades and or kind of more traditional apprenticeship
Yeah,
opportunities that helps guide them in their next steps forward. Absolutely.
great. Great. Okay, Seth.
The budget was passed. My getting ill
No
in the middle of...
fanfare, with zero questions.
No, we're not, it was like, yeah, I mean...
We were all worried about you,
I
though.
look at what was going on in that meeting, because I had to see the film.
Yeah.
Happy days. Anyway, first of all, I'm very proud of the folks who were able to step in. Joanne Hennessy and Lois Snyder. I don't want to use the incorrect one, but I'm going to use it anyway. Old hands who stepped in and knew how to make it run.
Yeah.
We have some interesting questions about when to schedule a meeting of your committee. If you're assigned to something, and I said this in the rules meeting, and there's a memo going out from me about it, if you're an assigned committee, you do not want to schedule your committee meeting the same night the RTM is going to meet. Why? Because if there are questions that come up, you got no way to answer them, and you wind up standing out on the floor of the RTM saying, gee, we got all these questions and we don't have any answers. And that doesn't work, because then the RTM gets uneasy. They're saying, well, you've got all, it doesn't mean they shouldn't have been passed, and it doesn't mean the support wasn't there, but when a committee that's assigned gets up there and says, well, we're not sure about this, we're not sure about that, and da-da-da-da.
Especially when the information was all readily available.
It
to
had
them.
already been.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
Lessons
I'm
learned.
going to breathe again here
Yep,
for a
lessons
second.
learned.
I have spoken with the chair. Unfortunately, the chair had a death in the family and was out of town. So we have the vice chair running the meeting before the RTM. It was a perfect storm. So we will be going out with a memo on Island Farms, which is on the agenda for the 10th.
Great.
And my hope and expectation is that it would pass.
So Seth, I just want to underscore for you to share with the rules and your committee chairs that board chairs and staff are always available to assist. And even if it's a last-minute request, we would be happy to come to a meeting and provide appropriate information. We don't want to leave anybody with unanswered questions. So we're available and offer that to the RTM.
And I would say on top of that, that's not a new offer. That's always been there. And
It's always been there.
all of us who have chaired committees know that.
Yep.
And
Do they?
that means you have to communicate with your committee, because if there are questions out there, you want to talk to them before you have your meeting so that the right people can be in the room to answer the questions. We understand phones, mail, and all of that, but that can be imperfect, and there's nothing like hearing it from the horse's mouth. Thank you.
Do you still have the subcommittee meetings? Does a lot of subcommittees still meet before the RTM meeting?
Yes.
Can you
Yeah.
switch
An
that
hour
at all?
before.
That's so hard.
No, well, that.
'Cause when I was on
is why
PZ&H, it was
some
a week
chairs have
before.
taken to having their meeting the same night. If you are in tight with your committee and you know that the subject they're going to cover is pro forma, you can take that chance, but it's not advisable. It's just not advisable. You leave yourself, you can't know that you've got every member of the committee on board, and you can't know that all the questions have been answered. So you want to leave yourself some leeway, a week or so, in case there's a question, so that you can get it answered.
You're speaking to the choir, but.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Can you
just
set
for
a
the-
policy,
Yeah,
Seth?
we're on
That's-
TV.
Can you set a policy, an RTM policy, that you have to meet no less than a week before the RTM meeting? I know Joanne still does that for PZ&H.
Did,
Yeah.
PZ&H always did. I was on PZ&H for 10 years ago. We always met a week before. An hour before is crazy.
For
important
that's,
stuff?
you gotta go, I've got to go back and read what we can
They only
Yeah.
meet once a month.
do, because
9
the
times a
rules
year.
are very broad was
Yeah.
looking for the right, I was gonna say loose for a minute, but broad
Yeah.
on what chairs can do, what committees can do. Any committee in the RTM can report on anything.
Yep.
So that's why we assign some, the idea being that these folks are informed about it. And when they come before you, they will have been informed and make a concise and proper report to the RTM so that the RTM can make a good decision.
So can I ask a
Yes.
question? You have a very long agenda for the 10th.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a
True.
lot of very critical
Right,
issues.
yes.
And obviously, you can't always predict the flow of, like, you had a few meetings canceled at the beginning of the year. What would it have taken to have a special meeting in June so you could have split the agenda because the issues are long and detailed?
Well, we're talking about 100 people twice in a month, because you're not gonna do it in July.
Right, no.
So, the RTM, generally has a pretty good idea of what's on the agenda, and what's gonna
Okay.
take to get it done.
All right, so you think...
They come in ready, and I try and keep the pace up. So, the only one that has me thinking is, we have a little ordinance that's gonna come before the town, the bag ordinance, affectionately known. And that could go long. But the rest, I think there has been a lot of discussion. We've added on a gift from the Darien Athletic Fund, so that will be on there, the jogging track. But I'm sensing at this point that these could move along pretty well. I thought about it, but I thought, Also, if you get everybody kind of feeling in a good mood and they're kind of moving these things along, you can get it done in a reasonable amount of time, and provide it creates a good environment. All the juices are flowing, everybody's thinking, and things are getting done. So it is a chance. There are ways to move to another meeting, but thought better to get this done. It's June, let's get it done. And I think the Rules Committee, I'm looking around the Rules Committee, and they were saying, let's go. So that's it. So coming up, yes, we have Highland Farms back on the agenda. We're going to, as John mentioned, do the fund closeouts. We're going to do the $63 million for the schools. And
The town and the schools.
the town and the schools, yeah.
You get hammered.
I was gonna say, it's a fun morning, guys. Should have had another kid miss a bus.
We're gonna do the jogging, we're gonna do the jogging track, and we're gonna do the plastic bags. And that will be an exciting evening.
Okay,
Thank you, and thank all the boards for their cooperation on the town budget. That it really went quite well.
It did. 0 questions on a $150 million budget. Fascinating.
Well, we had lots of questions
Yeah,
beforehand.
no.
I was gonna say, I don't know about you, but I had.
That's big.
I just want to say that if there are any taxpayers that are watching that have questions on the Board of Selectmen budget, please call me.
Yeah, we had lots, so you can still call me, but.
Yes.
Well, there are, on 2 key committees, there are 13 members on each one.
Yeah.
And they were baked into all of the meetings. And
They
the
really-
dialogue was not insignificant. If
Yeah.
you want to, if you're having trouble sleeping some night, you can go back and look at Vimeo and some of those.
Channel 79 does a great job.
Yeah,
If you
channel-
want, the information is out
It
there.
is there, and I just have great appreciation to those volunteers putting the time, but it makes a huge difference.
It does. Finance and budget did a great job. Steve? what else? Anything
I
else
always
to
have a
offer?
long list of stuff, so I'm just gonna say them off. If you want more about it, you can stop me, because
Perfect.
it's already
Yep.
caught
We're
up in
gonna
it.
be done in 15.
Yes, I'll
Okay.
go fast. We did a multifamily housing spreadsheet. That's a work in process document. If you look at it, eventually, it was John's idea Staff did it. It took a long time for staff to do this work request. We got it. Our town, as a town, has done a ton of affordable housing and multifamily housing in the last decade, last 10 years. I think it goes back to 2015. I've picked up some errors. They're going to fix it. It's minor. I think the things that are important is, one, I think it's something that you should be proud of.
Very, I've seen it, I've worked
Okay.
with Jeremy and John
Okay.
on it.
And then I think also Board of Education might want to know about it.
Yeah, John
because
sent it out.
There's
It's a
some
lot of work, yeah.
Yeah. Next, 2 Squab Lane, which is the White House behind Steam and Brooks Brothers and all that stuff. There's an application pending on that. It's been delayed a couple times. They need to have, they're making the building from a 2-story building with a basement to a 3-story building because they're digging out the bottom, so it's going to be a 3-story building. They have to have ADA access as per state code and federal code and everything else. The initial plan was to put a ramp on town property, which is, I don't know if it's town property or state property, but it's the parking lot. We were under the impression they got some kind of, yes from the town. I don't know if they did or not. That doesn't matter. Now they're redrawing the plans to put something on there. They're putting a lift inside the building to make it ADA handicapped accessible. It's a very, very visible project in our town. Everyone's going to see it. So we're taking a very good, hard look at it to make sure it looks right, because it's dead center in the middle of town, even though it's in the back.
Ed has been working very closely with Jeremy on that application to make sure that the ADA amenities are appropriate for public use. I think that's the objective.
That's the objective.
Yes.
That's
Not just for the people who are going to those private businesses, but
Correct.
for public use.
Correct.
So Ed is involved.
Yeah. I'll leave it at that. That's fine. I was going to say something else, but it doesn't matter. The high school cross-country trail is on the agenda for final approval Tuesday night. We've added to the application. We have draft resolutions on, there's 2 applications. One is, I think it might have been confused a little bit. One is Parks and Rec wants to use the dealer property for a jogging trail that's going to be connected to the high school's application for around the school. Both were vetted. There were a couple, to me, are minor issues, and I'll just give them out to you guys. If the town of Selectmen or the police department want to put parking spaces on that street, it's got nothing to do with planning and zoning. The police department can put parking wherever they want to, and they can change it. I actually park in front of, on this side of the road when I go to Valvallis for breakfast, and there's just 4 parking spaces that cut in, and nobody ever parks and says 2-hour parking. So that's really not under our purview. So if anyone has an issue with parking, that's one of them, then that goes to somebody else and it doesn't come to us.
The local traffic authority, the police commission is the local traffic authority who makes those decisions
Right.
on parking.
Right. And something you said earlier, and I just want to make sure I said it. I sent an email to you, to your AOL email, because it's on my phone, and I just thought about it, so I sent it to you. And the reason why I sent it to you is because I don't have those other guys in my department in my phone.
Okay.
One of your signs was busted, so that's why it goes to you.
We
So-
need to update your email address. Because my kids told me that it proves my age using
I know,
AOL,
I'm
so I
sorry.
don't use it anymore.
I'm sorry. I apologize. But that's why I did that.
jstevenson@darien.ct.gov.
Yeah, that's hard. The jogging trail, that'll be done. Hopefully it passes this weekend. There's a couple changes to the draft resolutions, but I think we covered everything. Just so you know we're on the same page. There's this one, when the path was first done, and I have no idea how it happened, they cut Mr. Miller's property by 3 feet, and the path was going to this guy's property. It's now at least 10 feet off that guy's property, and I made sure that they put on, it's called a lathe, it's LATH, which is the wooden stick where you put the orange tape around it. Anywhere where the path comes within, I think it's 8, 10, or 15 feet of somebody's property, like on Holly Lane, they're going to put the lathes on there, which is an extra. I had my property staked out. It's $350. We don't want to put around all 56 acres. That'd be a colossal waste of money. But where it comes close to somebody's house, it's going to mark. So people say, okay, that's my property. That's the town property. We're going to be fine.
And I assume our motion is in the application for the, in our application, you have the Board of Education motion on this, which.
It's a file, yeah.
Okay.
Like,
And does the selectmen have that as well?
We have not formally approved this yet. We received a presentation from the Parks and Rec Commission and the DAF at our last meeting. We took a sense of the meeting vote and in support, unanimous support of the project, but it'll be back on our agenda for June 3rd. So I had some questions about the timing of all the approvals. Have you
So-
taken a final vote on it?
No,
yet?
so part of this, and just so you know, our work, I've asked that we, with big gifts, draw up some policies around big gifts,
Yeah.
and so how it works. Because fields, lights, have been done differently. But I think we're on the right path, and the attorneys, and Wayne has weighed in, and Tom Mooney's weighed in, that we're on the right path, and that
Yeah.
this project is moving forward appropriately. So the Board of Education's original motion was that the DF could move forward with this gift, and we would come back after all governmental approvals and approve. And so that would allow all, it spoke to some of Mr. Orsini's concerns and some other processes before. It would allow all the government bodies to understand this gift and make sure it fit appropriately. And it sounds like you guys have made changes as is fitting of P&Z, or you may if you adopt this resolution. The board did in its original put some restrictions in, which I talked to Lori Bohr about, that there are no dogs on the running path, on our portion of the running path at any time. And use of it is closed during school days and when summer school is in session.
We heard about that. We didn't hear about the dogs. So
Okay.
thank you.
So I will forward it to everyone so they
Yeah,
have
please.
it.
Can you please forward it
Yes.
to me? Yeah, thank you.
But I think that it, we deal in a world of both security and students, and so the board discussed those at length in the early meetings, and just so everyone is aware. But we will have final approval after the RTM in this case, which was based on the lights model. We're going to solidify a model in the future.
Yeah.
The scoreboard
Yeah, 'cause
model was cheaper.
I'm interested in that. I think it's odd that the Board of Ed will approve after the RTM for this gift.
We can talk offline. I would agree with you. In
Yeah.
the future, I think
Yeah.
that the boards should be before. The lights were after, the fields were before, and that's why I asked Wayne and Tom to talk about real property gifts
Yeah.
and to just come up with good guidelines. They both
Yeah.
agree that this project is appropriately being handled at the time, but I think going forward, it would be great if, at least from our standpoint, we were very clear on everyone on our path, and then the town may weigh in, and so it may end up being
Yeah.
a joint conversation. But real property gifts cause all these questions.
Yeah, yeah.
But this
It
application.
came up on rules, and
Yeah.
said, wait a minute, the boards haven't voted on this
Yeah.
thing yet,
Yeah.
and
We
so
will-
how
we
are
will
we
have
putting
voted.
it on the
Yeah.
RTM?
Yeah.
And
So-
a lovely person sitting next to me grabbed me kind of like this and said, Seth, they can't do outdoor track if you don't do this now, so.
Well, that's not really the
You
reason
know,
why.
Over, what do you call it? It's not outdoor, it's.
Cross-country.
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 The light,
Cross-country in the
we're
fall.
following the lights model at the moment because it's the most recent model.
Okay.
I
You
Fields were done
can do
differently.
whatever you want. I would look back at how you did the scoreboard, because that was the first one.
Yeah. I will
that
tell you
was
I
cheap.
have, and they've all,
Yeah, they probably have.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
don't know.
But we have very generous people in the community, and so we should just be very clear on how we do it, and then everyone can follow along.
Definitely.
But this process, let me be clear for anyone watching, the public, I do think we have had a very clear process. I think it has gone through the appropriate town bodies and will continue to, so I think we're on the right path. It'll just be kind of the work going forward, so anyone coming forward with a gift knows the steps and the order.
2 points on that. I don't know if your motion, I don't recall seeing it, but if you read our resolution, EPC, in our world, there's a process to go. EPC approved it, so EPC's approval is underneath our approval. Like if a variance was approved, that's underneath our approval. Relative to money, we approve stuff all the time, and we don't really care about the money.
Yeah.
The only thing I care about is I know when I said to whoever the applicant was, I want you to lay out and stake every single property that's within 10 feet, that costs that guy money,
Yeah.
right? So whether it's $250 or $3,000, that's not my problem,
Yep.
right? That's his problem, but that's why I didn't want to say you have to stake out all 56 acres, because that's a colossal waste of money, because the
Yeah.
path goes across the baseball field. You don't need to,
Yep.
Yeah, mark
Yeah.
off it.
That's
So yeah,
so-
ours were all care and custody concerns, and
Okay.
so it'll be good to see how they layer, yes.
And we'll have the Board of Selectmen will have the planning and zoning and EPC approvals before we vote on it on June 3rd,
Yeah,
correct?
that makes sense, yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
okay, great.
It may, if this passes on Tuesday night, it passes at
Perfect.
10 o'clock on Tuesday night, we're
Okay,
done.
good.
Moving on, 77 Leroy is back on the docket. I have to correct the minutes from last time, Linda. They want to switch the age restriction from 62 down to 55. It keeps getting pushed back, but that's on our agenda this week. I have no idea where that's going to go because, to me, it's more of a legal question, and they argued till they're blue in the face to make it 62, and now so they say 62 is illegal, which that's odd to me. In our last meeting, we went through what I'm going to call 11 spot zoning changes, where some of the properties in town are split between a residential piece that's on the post road and the rear, off the post road and residential pieces on the post road. We kind of want the zoning lines to follow the property lines. Of those 11 changes, we also went to all the neighbors. The neighbors weighed in. I think 6 were yeses and 5 were nos. One was, there's that new house that we love that's next to the Tibbetts property, or the Christian Science Reading Room.
Yes, yes.
Across from that is zoned commercial. It's a residential house. We wanted to make it a residential house. The neighbor didn't want it because it affects setbacks, so we did not approve that, and there's a couple other ones. We're also voting on the, reviewing again, the entire zoning code change next week. Some's got to do with hotels and not hotels, combining zones, other things like that. And also the MU zone, I'll get to that in a second. There's a thing called Service Business East and Service Business. We were going to combine those two to one and take best practices on both and combine them. The one issue that you may have not seen on TV, Heights Pizza, they purchased the old Town Electric building. At one point in time, they had an application. They had an application to put a pizza parlor in there. That application was since withdrawn. They or the neighbors don't like that change. So of the 13 changes we have in the zoning codes, some may get approved, some may not get approved. Relative to the MU zoning, that's supposed to be a grounded overlay zoning versus now what we call a floating zone, or a zone use that's on a shelf. They've used it sometimes, they've not used it sometimes. It was developed for, it's kind of a stretch, but it was developed for the library. They used it for the library. We used it for Old Town Homes. And it was not used for tokening school. But it's a good tool for the municipal and the schools to use if they want to. Right now it's planned, like it's gonna, I think it goes on, I think it also goes on the Public Works garage. In my guesstimation, there's nothing's gonna happen to Public Works garage in the next 30 years. I don't know, maybe there's a plan, who knows?
It'll be up to deep.
Exactly, so relative to that, it could be put on the schools, but if it gets on the schools, great. If it doesn't, then the school or town or somebody can always apply for it. We'll see where that one goes. I kind of sort of, where my own personal belief is I think it's better a floating zone, but I understand the reasons for the other way. We have 2 lawsuits that we're talking about. That's on a private gender Boy Scouts, so I talked about in the last meeting. And I think we have an executive section on 25 Brookside, which is a piece of land that's directly across the street from Maplewood. There's a suit in town for that. That, to me, is important because it's taxpayer money paying for our lawyers. And I don't really like that. What else? We talked about this last time. 2 commissioners not running for re-election.
How about an update on Palmer's and Federal Realty?
Nothing really. Nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked at my notes from last week. I
Yeah.
don't know anything new about that. What else? Blight. There's a couple. Kevin Cunningham is on our committee about the Blight committee. He's supposed to give us a report on that because he's on our board too. I know that one of the houses that I think I saw on TV was on the Blight docket was on Near Water Lane, going towards the bay. Now, in Weed Beach, now there's a demolition sign on that house, so the house is coming down, which is, I think, what they wanted to do a couple of years ago. Along that breath, I don't know, and I don't even know if it's on the blight list or not, but Patton Drive, when you come out of Patton Drive, that's house right in front of you. I don't know what's happening with that. It is a very ugly house. I don't know about it, and that relates to Palmer's. I stopped the other day when we did Palmer's approval. I wanted Patton Drive to go straight into that property. It never happened. They don't own it, so now we moved the stop line back to the other side of Patton Drive. I stopped there the other day. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we'll see what happens. The last thing.
Can speak to our Patton Drive expert.
I missed that. Where did you move the stop sign?
You know where when you stop for the light, you stop at the corner. So now, when that gets developed, you're going to stop in front of Patton Drive.
Oh, that would be great.
So that's where the stop line is.
That would be
So you don't
awesome.
get stuck.
You could get out.
It was correct, because I let somebody out the other day. We approve things like that on our board based upon the traffic authority and traffic consultants, but we don't enforce it, right?
Yeah.
So if you go there and you go up to where you've gone to for the last 10 years since you lived in town, you may get a ticket. I don't know if someone's going to enforce it or not, but we'll see.
Well,
I
they-
personally,
Coming down Holland Tree, you mean they should
Yeah.
stop before Patton, even if it's a red light?
Yeah.
when it is a red light,
It'll say stop
Which is-
here on
yeah,
red. With a
exactly.
sign.
Yeah.
which is
Yes.
20 yards from the light.
Okay.
It's worth a try.
Yeah. I can't speak to that house. I'll have to follow up to see if that was ever actually reported as blight, because I know there was some improvement activity that happened there.
I don't
So,
know. I'm not
I'll check.
reporting it. I'm not
Okay,
I'm not
fine.
saying anything about it, but I know it's there,
Fine.
and it's relates to Palmer's. The last thing is, that's on my list, in planning and zoning and also in my real estate business, there are at least 3 companies, and it kind of relates to you, that are daycare school companies
Yeah.
that want to come to our town.
Yep.
One guy came to my office yesterday and said, "Hey, we wanted to expand in Connecticut. We've looking in Darien. You know, are there any sites?" And they hired. I don't know if they hired. They hired. Or they're working with a broker that works at CBRE. That company's called Building Blocks. They're looking. They're looking to build a school in our town. The other school that really wants to come in here is the Goddard School. They're looking very hard in town. And this is it for me. It spans business and town government, but I think it's important. From the town perspective, I would like to be in front of it.
Me too. I've actually been speaking to a woman from
Okay.
CBRE.
I would like to be in front of it and say, we want a school in that spot, versus them saying, we want to put a school in this spot. A couple of years ago, I think it was an application to put the Goddard School on 80 Old Kings Highway or 84 Old Kings Highway. And when we switched, we approved that in there. Goddard School ended up not going there. As part of our overall plan that we're doing for zoning right now, Craig Flaherty represents 3 Parklands, which is next to 1 Parklands, which is the new assisted living facility. They want to make sure when we do the zoning change that you could put adult daycare in that building, which is along the same lines.
It's like Elder House, yeah.
Right, if you put adult daycare in that building, or even if you approve daycare in that building, the ed specs where you come in, and maybe it's not really, it's your business, and it's kind of sort of my business.
Yeah, it would be private. so-
100%,
Yeah,
100%, but you have to have like good parking and a portico share and a drive-through lane,
Yeah.
and then someplace to play outside. You're right next to Selleck Woods.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good spot. I'm not telling you what to do by any stretch of imagination, but I don't know if there's any use that's ever been for the old senior center, which was a school.
Why don't you and I and Jeremy and John sit down and sort of strategize around this so
Okay.
that we can have a common message with the people that we're talking to who are looking to bring that business. I
It-
fully support it. So
Okay, I thought from a policy and procedures and political standpoint, you supported.
it's a
'cause
gap in
need.
service in our community that we should work proactively to fill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're also looking, like I said, 3 Parklands is one. They're also going to individual private landlords and saying, can we put daycare in your ground floor? In my business, we just did a huge thing in Westchester County where it's a business park, and inside that business park were 3 daycare centers inside the ground floor of office buildings, and they put the stuff in. It's a lot of drive-through stuff in there. Just a couple other things, but I think it's fine. My daughter, Kelsey, took the EMT exam, she's a postie.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go quick. I'm going to give a couple of legislative updates. I think if you're watching the news, you already know these things. It looks like the vote on tolls will head to a special session this summer where they can have more time to really debate the issue. They are sincerely hoping to have a budget by June 5th. Who knows? We'll get more details for you on some good public health legislation that was taken care of this session. Sometimes we don't focus on the good in light of the controversial. So, paid family medical leave passed the Senate, but it's controversial for even the governor, who there's things in the proposal that he does not approve of. So we'll see how the debate unfolds in the House, and he's already threatened a veto on that if certain things aren't modified. Minimum wage passed both chambers. It's expected that the governor will sign that. The goal is $15 an hour over a 4-year period of time. It will begin to be phased up this October. So that does impact all of us, and we are going to do an analysis here on how it will impact government. I assume it might in some ways. I don't know if it affects your part-time staff, but you might want to ask your administration if there are any impacts to the minimum wage. Let's see, what else? The teacher pension sharing is still very much alive and well, and people are digging in their heels on both sides of that particular issue. It was interesting that I got a letter from CAE opposing the push down of teacher pensions. So I think that we as a community are unilaterally opposed to that idea, and have communicated such to our representatives. So thank you for everybody who let their voice be known on that. We'll see
I think
where
the
that
board
comes.
did as well as
Yes.
Jamie did,
Saw that. Yeah.
represented. I know CEA feels strongly about it. But yes, I think we can all support some concerns coming out, that there are some concerns for Darien coming out of Hartford.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to draft up something that gives some more detail to the public so they understand what the detailed challenges are with that. From my perspective, I'm so excited to be welcoming Dr. Adley in July. I think he's going to be phenomenal. He's coming from the town of Granby. Hopefully everybody read about him in the media. He's a breath of fresh air, really, and I think that it's great. Dr. Landon has been excellent as an interim, but it'll be really nice to be back into a stable, permanent superintendent situation.
Yes, and I forget because we met late, that I haven't officially told
Exactly.
this group. I'm
Yes.
sorry, my apologies. That Dr. Adley is our superintendent. I know I mentioned him in my report,
Yeah.
but I think Darien will be well served by him. And
Feel free to take a moment if you want to share information
yeah,
about him.
it was a national search. We had strong candidates that came forward, and I would say, while those searches are always confidential, the board certainly had its pick of excellent qualified candidates, and Dr. Adley rose to the top of that group. So he was able to come and spend some time and meet Jamie and some of the people in town hall. He will be back, and we will have him meet the other town leaders, and we will try our best to maybe even organize just a time where everyone can come in and meet him. But I think he'll be well served. He has a long, distinguished career in education. He's worked both public and private. He is very well respected. He's actually well respected up in Hartford as well, and has been actively engaged. So I think that kind of helps us in terms of making sure our voice is heard up in Hartford on educational issues. But he is first and foremost a teacher and an educator, and I think that really what you want is an educational leader at the top of your school system, because that's where your superintendent should be focused. So I can tell you my conversations with him so far have been strong and positive. He will begin here July 1st. And we will, in the busy month of July, look to get him to meet everyone, and if not, as soon as everyone is back from vacation. But he will be ready and to hit the ground running we were very excited to have him.
Great, thank you.
So
So
my
he-
apologies, I forgot that we hadn't met last month.
So he didn't mind the commute?
He will be relocated.
Yeah.
He will be
Yeah,
relocating.
That's a little,
And
forget it.
yes.
Just testing.
Yeah, no, he did a couple times, and I had warned him about our lovely situation on our highways. But he will be relocating from Granby, and he really does value kind of being close and being part of the community. So I think, again, we'll be well served by that. And he's committed to Darien as we are committed to him. So
Yep.
hopefully we'll have a very long tenure here in Darien.
It's a small, small world. I actually happen to know the chair of the Board of Education in Granby. And I've spoken to her a number of times, and people in the statewide meetings that I have attended in the last 2 weeks who are aware that he's moving from Granby to Darien have all said unilaterally, we're getting the best of the best.
Yeah.
So I think that's fantastic news. Well done on the part of the Board of Ed.
Does he have any
Thank you.
kids?
He does. He has 2 grown children who all went through Granby schools when he was either a teacher, a principal, or the superintendent. So he has lived in close proximity to student issues.
Yep.
And I would just say, Jamie had mentioned that once we announced that she knew the board chair, Alan had said, please reach out to her. She was lovely and really
Yeah.
said the same thing, like, you're getting the best of the best. I hate to see him go, but I'm glad you guys are getting him.
She's
So,
happy for us.
Yeah, she was lovely,
Yep.
quite frankly. Very
And Seth,
lovely.
you will be so happy to know that he was a professional soccer player.
Yes.
Whoa.
Which works in our world,
Well,
right?
yes. I brought I know where Granby is, having coached girls travel soccer.
Yep, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
know
so.
exactly where it is.
So just a few other things. Memorial Day is coming up, and this is probably the best time of the year in the town of Darien. So please come out. We've got Down on the Farm at the Nature Center on Saturday. Hope to bring my granddaughter. We've got the parade on Monday, as always. It's just the best event in Darien. And then the ceremony immediately following in Spring Grove Cemetery, and of course the food fair at
Posted.
Tilly Pond Park. Hoping for a beautiful day, just like yesterday. It'd be really nice. We heard about the Oxbridge Elementary School Awesome Committee working very hard. Same work is being done for Pear Tree Beach renovations. So that project is also moving along. We talked at length about Highland Farm, sincerely hoping that that funding request passes the RTM so we can get that property activated and the taxpayers that are paying for it to use it. So Captain Don Anderson has coined the phrase, Carmageddon is coming. The weekend of May 31st and the following weekend, it's actually fascinating to me, and I think I'm told that they've put up some viewing stands. They're going to move the bridge into place. The Accelerated Bridge Rehabilitation Program, the bridge over I-95 at Exit 9, is going to be moved into place over those 2 weekends. It will be Carmageddon because I-95 will be closed. They've built workaround routes, but there's no question that there will be impacts to the post road. So we have prepared as well as we possibly can in terms of public information that's gone out. We have extra officers that will be working both of those weekends. So just be prepared. You may want to avoid the area, go on vacation, take the train.
Take the water.
Just don't drive to
whatever you
vacation.
do.
Got lacrosse games up north, maybe.
But it's a
Yeah.
phenomenal project, and kudos to, I have to give credit to Commissioner Rediker for using that program, because we'll be inconvenienced for 2 weeks where we could be inconvenienced for 3 years otherwise. So
They practice on Old Kings Highway, remember?
yeah. So actually, no, that was not an accelerated bridge project.
Yeah.
I
Over-
thought there was
No, that project went on way too long.
Wait,
So, this is so exciting. I'm thrilled to share this with you. The Bicentennial Committee, particularly Sarah Kina, has been working with students at the high school to develop a logo for the bicentennial. And there was a whole bunch of kids involved at first, and then it got whittled down to 4. So instead of making it a competition, Sarah had them work together. So 3 students worked together to come up with a phenomenal logo for our bicentennial, and they unveiled it yesterday. They were here for a ceremony, and this is the logo for our bicentennial celebration. Isn't that fabulous?
That's cool.
And I got all choked up yesterday because I said to the kids, they have no idea this logo is going to live on for over 100 years till we do the tricentennial.
Someone else.
Whatever you call
Someone
it. They have amazing ideas too. The kids came up with merchandising ideas. They will be fully integrated into the process of planning for the bicentennial. You'll see this logo on banners in the downtown and all PR materials that go out. So big shout out to the committee and especially Sarah Kina and the 3 students who are Kelly Niederreither, Charlie Callery, and Will Harmon, who, fabulous that they're all juniors, because they'll be here to see the fruits of all of their great labor. So I'll end my report with that very happy news, and we have some minutes to approve from March 28th.
Jonathan said, okay, on this minute before he left.
Perfect, all right.
In my paragraph,
Change the 65 to 62.
correct, and then where it says, Mr. already mentions the 2 or 3 members of the commission. I don't know if I said 2 or 3, but I know
It's just 2.
it's 2. I don't know what the Democrats are doing, but I know the Republicans.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other corrections or additions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Seth, seconded by
Second.
Steve. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Great, thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seth, and seconded by Tara. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great, thanks. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, everyone.